If you're like me, you probably connect tons of devices to the internet. Of course, your standard IT devices, your computers, your laptops, desktops, cell phones even, but also other devices, your TVs. Of course, one device that's really popular for a lot of people these days is one of these, an Amazon Echo. This is actually an Echo Dot that I won. I believe I got this at a raffle or some kind of competition, but I use this in my office and it connects to the internet and it gives me interesting information like weather, useful information like the weather and things like that. But how do I know that this Echo Dot is only using the applications that I want it to? How can I tell that it's actually using only those approved applications? And is there a way that I can lock it down so that it's not using applications that I don't want it to over the internet? That's what I'm going to show you in this video. Over the last few months, I have been monitoring my Amazon Echoes. I have 3 in my house, and I've been able to see which applications that they're using. I'm using Palo Alto Network's App ID in order to monitor which applications those Amazon Echoes are actually using when they communicate with the internet. Note that Palo Alto Network's App ID does not use ports, so it's not just telling me, oh, it's communicating with this port, and therefore it's that application. Palo Alto Network's App ID actually is able to see the network traffic to see what specific application is communicating with that traffic, regardless of what the port is. So in this video, I'm going to show you 3 things. How have I been able to monitor what applications these devices are using? How can I actually lock down those applications so that those Amazon Echoes can only use those applications and they're not allowed to use other applications which they haven't been using, which could lead to attacks? And finally, I'm going to show you how to get more information on those specific applications. So let me open up my PA440 here. And the first thing I will show you is under Objects. You see here that I have an address group with my 3 Amazon Echoes. I have one in the bedroom, one in the kitchen, and one here in my office, which you can see over there. Well, kind of. You can see it. Kind of small, but you can see it. You can see it on that desk right there, that little desk. Anyway, I have these 3 Amazon Echoes here, and I use those in a security policy. So if I go to Policies, and I scroll down, here you can see I have a policy Echo Outbound, which allows for my Echoes to the internet, any application, and any service. A reminder for those who aren't aware or don't remember, service is what Palo Alto Networks uses for port. So whenever you see service in a Palo Alto Networks policy, just think port. So right now, I'm allowing those Amazon Echoes to communicate with any application on any port. Now this is a very open policy, and it's just allowing them to communicate outbound however they want, which is great for availability, but it's not very secure. And if you have a lot of security concerns, especially with these types of devices, you might want to lock down which specific applications and ports they can communicate on. And an easy way to do that with a policy that doesn't have any application specified is to use what you see over here, the policy optimizer. And you can see this rules without app controls. And this is what I want to focus on primarily in this video. If you click Rules Without App Controls, you can see here Rule 11, Echo Outbound. And what you can see is that there have been 10 apps seen, and there have been 117 days with no new apps. That usually means that this is an app that is ripe for adding apps, because there haven't been any new apps seen in this case, almost 4 months. So if I add new applications, the chances that if I lock down the applications, the chance that a new application will pop up is very low. It's very safe when this number is very high to lock down those applications. When a number is much lower, when you see, like you can see here, a couple of the rules have just 1 day with no new applications or 3 days, then that means that it's probably not necessarily a good idea to lock down the apps, especially not very strong. And I'll show you in a second what I mean by that. But you may want to just focus on the ones that have high numbers here. So in this case, it's been 117 days. So this is perfect for adding the app controls to this policy. So if I click this number 10 here, I can actually see which particular applications that are being seen from these Amazon Echoes. One is SSL, which we all know and love, and that is the primary one. So that's where most of the traffic is SSL. There's web browsing, Spotify, Amazon Music Base, DNS Base, NTP Base, Stun, Google Base, and RTCP and RTP audio. So what I can do is I can highlight all of these applications, and Palo Alto Networks makes it super easy to now add rules based on these applications. Say you're not totally ready to fully lock this down and you just want to create a rule above this rule to start capturing this traffic, to start catching this traffic. Then you can create a cloned rule. You can also add these applications to an existing rule, so it doesn't necessarily have to be to this rule echo outbound that's currently assigned to these addresses. You could add it to a different rule if you wanted to, or you could add to this very rule the echo outbound. Before I do that, let me show you the possibility of creating a cloned rule, because there's something that I think you might find interesting here, and that's the application filter. So if you want to create a cloned rule with the application filter, what's cool about this is that it will actually automatically select all of the subcategories which are being hit with these applications. So here you can see 55 audio streaming, 83 encrypted tunnel, 130 infrastructure, 206 internet utility, etc. With these subcategories, you can actually see up here on the top right that there are 702 matching applications. So if you wanted to, you could create a cloned rule and an associated application filter in order to sort of more broadly allow the subcategories of applications that you're seeing on this, rather than just those specific applications. So rather than only allowing these 10 applications, you're actually allowing 702 applications which match those particular subcategories. Again, this would be very useful if you're not interested in any super duper high security, locking it down super strong. You want to add some level of security, but your main focus is availability. Then this would be a way to do that using these application filters. Application filters are very, very useful, especially for being able to build rules that dynamically include new applications, or dynamically include the types of applications that you want users to be able to use without locking it down specific application by application. So it's really a trade-off. You can use application filters for a more user-friendly and available environment versus a more high security environment. Versus if you have a very high security environment, then that's where you can start specifying applications specifically. So that's how this application filters works. I'm not going to do that. Back in. What I actually want to do is I do want to lock down by the application. So I want to lock down just these 10 applications. So I'm going to add them to this rule. And now you even have another opportunity to be a little bit more broad. So what you see here is that you have a container app. So what a container app is it's the high level app, and then there's sort of more specific applications that are underneath that container. Think of it as like a folder. Like this is the folder of different apps that fall into this specific type of app, and then there's very, very specific apps underneath that. You can see some good examples here. There's Amazon Music, which has both Amazon Music Base and Amazon Music Streaming. We've actually only seen the Amazon Music Base in my Amazon Echoes. We also have DNS, but you see here DNS includes both DNS base but also DNS non-RFC, and we haven't seen any non-RFC DNS. So really, especially from a high security perspective, you probably don't want to have DNS non-RFC. You really would want it just to be standard DNS, unless for some reason that's something that you have in your environment, in which case you would see it through this monitoring. Speaking of which, I know that a lot of people ask me, I have a lot of customers all the time ask me about how to baseline. This is another great way to baseline your environment, to be able to see what types of activities occurring in your environment, to do that baselining. You can also run reports, which I'm not going to discuss in this video, but if you want to see a video about reports and how reports can be used for baselining, put that in the comments and I'd be happy to make that video. So here's just some general ideas of what container apps look like. NTP also has NTP base and NTP non-RFC, for example, but there's a few different examples here. I'm going to make this much more secure, and so I'm also going to make this only the specific app seen. So this will just be those 10 specific apps. It doesn't going to include the general container of the apps. I'm going to include that folder of all the apps that fall into that app group. It's going to be just those 10 very specific apps that are going to be added to this rule. Then I hit OK. Again, I could add additional apps if I wanted to, but I'm not going to do that. And then I will hit OK. But before I do that, I actually want to save these apps. I'm going to take notes of what they are. And the reason that I want to do that is because I'm going to show you in a few minutes how to see more information about each of these apps. So let me take a quick note of these. So we've got SSL, web browsing, Spotify, Amazon Music base, DNS base, NTP base, Stun, Google base, RTCP, and RTP audio. Cool. I'll pull that out and I'll bring that back up later. So now that we have added the apps, let's hit OK, and then it's saving. So now if we go back to the security policies and we scroll down to the echo, you can now see that those applications have been added. What you'll also notice though is that the service has not been added. So these ports have not been locked down. But we also want to do that. Again, I'm trying to configure this for a high security configuration. So I'm going to open up this policy and go to the service/URL category tab, and I'm going to change any to application default. Now, what does that mean? Application default is very important, and I highly recommend for anyone to try to use application default on all of your policies where possible. What application default will do is it'll basically see the app, so it'll see, okay, this is SSL. What port should SSL run on? It should run on 443. So if it sees SSL running on 22, it's going to block that by default. Same thing if it sees SSH running on 443, it's going to block that by default as well. Now, in your environment, you may have particular applications that run on non-standard ports. Great, that's where you can start adding those ports one at a time. And you see here we have 80 and 443 by default in the firewall. So if you have those particular use cases where you need a non-standard port, then feel free to add those ports individually and build a specific policy for that. But in general, you want to add the application default, and then it will only allow the traffic on the port if it matches the application. So if it's SSL, it's only going to allow it on 443. If it's SSH, it's only allowed on 22, for example. So that's going to be our much more locked down version. Now in the past, I've made you all watch as I commit this. I'm not going to do that today, but this is what it looks like. So I have the applications listed here and the service. So I'm going to commit this, and I'm not going to make you watch the commit. What I'll do instead is I want to give you a little more information on these applications. For one thing, you might be wondering, okay, I put application default, but I have some compliance requirements and I need to actually put down what ports I'm allowing on this firewall. Okay, you can do that very easily. You can do that in the firewall. So I'll let this commit by going to Objects and Applications. And here you can see all the information on the applications. But if you don't want to do it in the firewall itself, I guess I can give you an example. So this very first one here, it opened up and I have all this information, right? But if you don't want to do it on the firewall, you can go to, and that's what I'm about to open up here. It's called Applipedia, so applipedia.paloaltonetworks.com. And here you can search all of those applications. So for example, we have our 10 applications here. So I start SSL. So I can start searching SSL, and it will pop up on the top here. Let's see if I can zoom in a little bit. So it'll pop up on the top here. And here you can see what category it is, what subcategory. So if you remember, those subcategories included encrypted tunnel, and that's where that subcategory came from, was from this application. It gives some more information up here, a general description. It gives some characteristics. But for the ports question, for the question on the service, you can see here standard ports TCP 443. So when you are using SSL, when you allow SSL and then you use the application default within the service selection on your policy, you are only allowing this port, TCP 443. So you can put in your compliance which port you're allowing. You say, okay, I'm allowing 443 with that application. So you can literally just pull this up, go one by one, and just say TCP 4443, and then you can document this in your compliance document if you need to. With web browsing, you can do the same. And here there's TCP 80. And yeah, a lot of these are going to be, you're going to know, like there's like DNS space. A lot of us are going to know that one, right? But here you can see that you're opening UDP 53, 5353, and TCP 53. So maybe in your environment, you can only allow UDP 53, for example. Well, in that case, you wouldn't just want to use the application default because it's going to open up all of these. What you would need to do then is introduce a specific service just for UDP 53 and make sure that it's only allowing traffic on UDP 53. So not only can the service be adjusted to open up ports for additional additional communication, it can actually also be used to lock down ports if you don't think that the Palo Alto Networks application defaults, standard ports, are strict enough. I am curious about some of some of these that are less popular. You may not have studied this in a Network Plus class, like Stun. I should zoom in on this, like Stun and RTCP. I am curious to see those, so let's look at those real quick. Stun. So it says it's a simple traversal of user datagram. It allows a client behind a NAT to find out its public IP address. And it uses TCP 3478 and UDP 3478. So that's interesting. You probably wouldn't learn that in a Network Plus class. Certainly interesting, more interesting applications. I also want to look at RTCP. That looks interesting to me. And it's a sister protocol to the real-time transport protocol, RTP. So this is important that we cover this one as well, because here you see UDP dynamic. And what that means is that you're really actually allowing any port with this application. What I will note, and something that's important to note here, is that just because you're opening up UDP dynamic on this port, note that it has to actually match this application. So it has to be RTCP in order to be open on any UDP port. It can't be SSL and then it can't be detected as SSL and then it'll be open on any UDP port. No, once it's detected as SSL, it's only going to allow it on TCP 443. So just a specific note there on how that application default works. It is tied to the specific application of that session. So that's how that works. That's how you can see more information about those applications. And if we go back to the firewall, we should be able to see if the commit has completed. Looks like it has. So if we look at my security policies, we can see here that the security policy is in place and the commit is completed. So now the echoes are limited to using only those 10 applications. So I hope you found that interesting. It's really cool to see which applications my echoes are actually using on the network. In this case, I did put the echoes in that address group and then monitor them that way. If a new echo was added to the network, I would have to add it to the address group in order for it to be detected. However, Palo Alto Networks now has something called device ID, in which it can actually detect new OT devices, new IoT devices, such as an Amazon Echo, and it can automatically put them into that rule based on what type of device that it is. I don't have that set up now, but if that's something that interests you, please put that in the comments. I hope to see you for my next video, and thank you for watching.